Welcome everyone. I'm excited for all of you to join us today. I'm going to introduce myself first. My name is Joseph Tadros. I'm the academic director of mathematics and also a math and science teacher at Northside Charter High School in New York City, specifically Brooklyn, New York. I'm a member of E4E's National Teachers Leaders Council and a new member of E4E's National Board of Directors. So we're here tonight because the teaching profession is in desperate need of transformation. Data from E4E's 2024 teacher survey, Voices from the Classroom, tells us that teachers don't believe that the profession is what it could be and should be. They don't believe it's rewarding, sustainable, diverse, dynamic, or collaborative. As a result, teachers are not recommending the profession to others. Only 16% of teachers would recommend the profession to someone they know. They don't believe that their school is meeting the needs of the vulnerable students. So, how do teachers believe these problems can be solved? And what do they say are the best ways to recruit a high quality and diverse workforce? Well, the number one thing teachers say, and there's no surprise here, they want higher compensation. However, teachers of color specifically say the best ways to do this are to create leadership pathways and to pay teachers in hard to staff schools and subject areas more. This tells us that money is, of course, part of the solution, but the solution is more nuanced than a simple across the board raises, especially for teachers of color. Teachers want opportunities to grow and they want to be paid more when they take on more challenging work, just as workers in every profession do. As Carlotta Pope says, I shouldn't have to choose between advancing my career as a leader and teaching kids. There should be a way for me to do both. And I think on the heels of Labor Day, it's time to finally give teachers what they're calling for. I believe that contracts offer a unique pathway for doing so, particularly at a time when systemic inequalities are growing deeper, when salary increases seem fiscally impossible. Tonight, we're going to talk about how to do this. And if we don't, we risk continuing the trend of teacher turnover and severe and acute teacher shortages, which in particularly devastate already historically marginalized students. Now, I'm a prime example of what's at risk. I left New York City public schools for a charter school because I wanted to grow my career by coaching other teachers, yet remaining in the classroom. I also want to be fairly compensated for that work. There are well-paying positions like this in New York City, but principals have to cover the costs from their own budgets and allocate them. I pursued these roles several times, holding a model teacher designation from the state of New York, but I was always told there wasn't enough room in the budget. I hit a ceiling in New York City public schools where I couldn't move up anymore unless I went back to school to pay thousands of dollars for another certification. So I decided to make a change. Now, this was a really hard decision for me. I spent years at my school building up my own community, working alongside families, and creating a culture of rigor in my classroom. I don't want other teachers to have to face that same choice. I want teachers to feel that they can grow and feel valued wherever they work. And that is why tonight is so important. So I'm going to pass it to Evan, who's going to talk more about teacher contracts and how they can deliver the changes teachers are calling for. Evan?
Thanks so much, Joe, and thanks for being here, everybody, tonight. That's such a powerful story to kick us off with, and why we want to answer this critical question. Um, uh, as districts face deepening inequities and growing financial challenges, how can they creatively use the limited resources they have to pay teachers fairly and retain their best talent, and strategically channel those resources to our most vulnerable students? So just last week, the Center for Reinventing Public Education released their State of the Student report. And that showed us that English learners, students with disabilities, and students from low-income homes continue to struggle to catch up post-pandemic. So in short, the pandemic expanded the opportunity gaps and achievement gaps that so many of us got into this work to address. And we also know that the teacher at the front of the classroom is the most important in-school factor in improving student learning and closing those gaps. The combination of these two things, the growing achievement and opportunity gaps, and the importance of having great teachers in the front of the students that need them most, is why we must address these challenges and channel our resources to address these acute teacher shortages. As an example, schools where more than 75% of students are low income are more than twice as likely to have vacancies when compared with schools that are less than 25% of students are low income. So that means it is our most historically disenfranchised, our most historically challenged populations that are most likely to have vacancies in their building or have teachers that are filling in that are underqualified or underprepared to be in those schools. In short, we need to use our resources in districts to ensure we're attracting and retaining great teachers in schools and in front of the students that need them the most. So quickly, at E4E, we believe that all teachers across the board should definitely be paid more. According to the Economic Policy Institute in 2022, teachers on average earned 73 cents for every dollar compared to other similarly educated professions. What makes this even more alarming is that's a dramatic decrease from in 1996, teachers earned 94 cents on the dollar compared to the rest of the professions that have similar education. So we've seen teachers earning less and less compared to their peers. And we know that districts have limited and contracting resources as ESSER funds and pandemic aid dry up. So we think there is a solution to this that involves teachers' contracts. Teachers' contracts should allow us to strategically use the resources we do have to support our students with the greatest need. We can pay highly effective teachers more. We can pay teachers in hard to staff schools more, and we can pay teachers in subject areas where we have acute shortages more. These ideas are not controversial. They are supported by educators by wide margins, but they are rarely included at scale in teachers' contracts. The research shows us that when we do this in a way that aligns with best practices, it has the impact. We can improve teacher retention, and we can improve student achievement and deliver on the promise of an educational environment that supports teachers and delivers for kids. So there are examples of districts that have done this, have used creative approaches to drive change in how they compensate teachers. E4E partnered with the Center for Public Research and Leadership, or CPRL, at Columbia University to publish a paper that sets a vision for reimagining teachers' contracts in ways like what I just described. We have uplifted examples of contracts that are doing innovative things to help adapt and evolve the conditions within schools to better support teachers and better serve kids. I encourage you to check out the paper. It's hosted on our website, whereweagree.org, and we created it to provide teachers and district and union leaders with both inspiration and concrete examples of how they can do this in their own environments. We all agree that the profession should be sustainable. The profession should be diverse and rewarding and dynamic and collaborative. We agree that the system as designed isn't working for students or really isn't working for teachers either, and that we really need to reimagine the conditions in our classrooms to better serve teachers and students alike. Where we agree spotlights the districts that are headed in this direction, that have taken an example in their contract and made meaningful change aligned to the evidence base of what will deliver for both kids and teachers. And tonight, we're going to tell a few of those stories. We're going to narrow in specifically on the stories and the teachers who've benefited from contracts that reimagine teacher pay, strategically channeling resources to where they're most needed. We'll hear stories from teachers and district leaders and union leaders who've implemented or experienced positive change related to differentiated compensation through their contracts. Higher pay for highly effective teachers in Ravenswood City School District, higher pay for hard to staff areas in Denver Public Schools, and higher pay for teacher leaders in Chicago Public Schools. Throughout the presentation, feel free to send questions via the Q&A feature and we'll do our best to answer them. If we don't get to them live, we'll follow up after the event. And we're so lucky to be joined tonight by representatives from each of these districts that I just mentioned to tell their stories. In addition to Joe Tadros, who you've already met, we're here with us tonight is Gina Sundara and Rhonda White, the superintendent and former union president of Ravenswood City School District, Paul Clifton from Denver Public Schools, and Olga Contreras from Chicago Public Schools. We're going to start this conversation tonight with Gina and Rhonda from Ravenswood City School District. In Ravenswood, which is a small school district in Silicon Valley that serves around 1,500 students, nearly all of whom identify as people of color, and around half of whom are multilingual learners. Rhonda and Gina came together to create a uniquely collaborative relationship and transform the district's approach to teacher pay in order to address severe teacher retention challenges. Their contract now advances teachers on their salary scale based on their summative evaluation rating from the prior year. And the impact has been clear. In the 23-24 school year, they retained 80% of effective teachers, and they started this school year without any teacher vacancies. Gina and Rhonda, I'm really excited to hand it over to both of you to tell the story of how this change was created and the impact it's already having on Ravenswood City School District. Thanks for being here.
Make sure we're off mute, Rhonda.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. Do you want to kick it off?
Afternoon, Evan, panel, and everyone else. It's so nice to be here with you today. I would like to say Ravenswood, in Ravenswood, we always begin any conversation with what is best for the child, meaning we always stay student-centered. So in Ravenswood, our passion for education and equity is truly valued, and our career has room to thrive. And if we go back to student-centered and what is best for the child, it is our most talented teachers who share this same value. And so we need to recruit and retain and reward these team members so that they are their best selves in front of teachers each and every day. And our way that we figured out how to do that was through compensation.
Yeah, that's right. And at Ravenswood, we now offer a competitive starting salary, but what really sets us apart is how quickly our teachers can move up the salary ladder. We call it the career ladder. So unlike many districts where you might only advance one step per year, Ravenswood actually allows outstanding teachers to move up as many as 5 rungs annually. And we call them rungs, and we'll explain later. So this fast track progression rewards dedication and impact in real time, giving teachers more financial security as they grow in their career.
Instead of the typical salary schedule, we've built a career ladder with 100 total rungs, so there's plenty of room for growth. Teachers who excel in their practice aren't just recognized, but they are rewarded by compensating them the salary that they deserve as the professionals that they are. So just to give you an example, we have several educators in our district now who make over $130,000 a year, and they still have the potential to grow and make up to $160,000 a year, which is among some of the highest salaries in our schedule, in our county, sorry. So instead of teachers getting a second or a third job and able to make ends meet, they now can spend their time and invest by having one job so they can focus all of their attention to our students, their career. By putting in the effort and continuously improving, this will be reflected in more compensation. The career ladder was designed to put the control in the hands of the teachers of how much they can decide to make each year.
So on average, our teachers see annually an annual salary growth of 4 to 7%. And that is before any cost of living increases. So we're setting a new standard for teacher compensation, and it's all about creating an environment where teachers feel valued, supported, and more importantly, just recognized for their hard work. And we knew from the start that this career ladder wasn't going to be it wasn't going to be perfect right away. So working with Rhonda and our Ravenswood Teachers Association, we built some flexibility into how we were going to roll this out. And that's why we launched with a pilot year. And it's allowing us to gather feedback regularly from teachers and make adjustments along the way. So every summer, we actually come together to review how things are going and make sure that the system is fair and effective, and that we still have buy-in from all the people that it matters to.
I'm getting a message that says there's a question. I'm not the most computer savvy, so hold on. Okay, I got them. So we'll figure out how to answer those 2 questions. And as Gina was talking about, we didn't just think we'd create this and it'd be a one and a done. We knew that this is a new compensation, this is a new way of thinking. So we would need to be open on both sides, administration and teachers, to going over this over and over again, looking at it differently. What worked, what didn't work, how were the timelines, how were the things that we're asking principals to do, as well as how we the things that we're asking teachers to do. So we want to make sure that the ultimate goal is that teachers are working on their practice, improving their practice, which ultimately benefits students. So in the end, the career ladder is about giving teachers more opportunities to advance, earn more, and feel recognized for their dedication to their students.
Ronnie, do you think we should tackle this
Yeah,
first
I know.
question?
I'm slow. I can't find it. So I can hear many of you thinking and asking this question. How did we get to this point? How did this come up? This more money, this compensation, not the normal one step, but these rungs in this career ladder. And I would say the two key factors were relationships and then negotiations. So we have had a series of superintendents that were not their best selves, and that showed up in many different ways. But Gina became the superintendent in 2020, and it was a game changer because Gina was not just some new person who came to the district to come and fix us or do this or do that, but she was a part of the community and part of the team. She had been a teacher in the district, she had been a vice principal and a principal before she moved to the district office in her roles there. So she knew exactly what we were dealing with, and she knew from our many discussions of president and our HR director that we can train teachers all we want. We can give them access to everything. But if we cannot retain them, we start all over again for our students. So I remember Gina and I sitting down, I think at my house or her house, and having this conversation. If we can't pay our teachers well, we're going to keep losing them.
Yeah, and literally we have such a relationship where we had many conversations, and those conversations allow us to have honest questioning and inquiry about how and why can't we pay teachers what they're worth? Why can't we offer them more than when they're going above and beyond, just like any other job? And we had the history of working together in the classroom, so we knew what it took, and we were committed to figuring this out. And it wasn't easy.
Was not. And I think what we realized was that there has to be a connection, and the connection is the relationship. And we have to stop thinking about the district office as a them and us, the teachers, is us. So there is no us and them because we're all fighting for the same thing. We are all fighting for what's best for students. And so Gina and I just built a relationship, but what we needed to do was we needed to bring the executive team from the district and the executive team from the district together in a way that was authentic and real. So I had a weekly standing meeting with the HR director, and then we got to maybe daily checking in over the phone calls. How do we take care of things before they become problems? We've both got to learn how to trust each other, and then also how to figure out other things. But relationships was key, and having a shared vision.
Yeah, we were very intentional about really just having a thoughtful conversation. And again, Rhonda mentioned this at the very beginning, but how do we have these conversations and keep the students at the center who need the best adults in front of them every single day? And so it took time, and that meant, like Rhonda was mentioning, her standing meetings with HR, and then the executive team from the Ravenswood Teachers Association and the executive team from Ravenswood holding monthly team meetings to share what is really going on in real time on the ground. And we would problem solve those things, which then if you are problem solving and being proactive, that builds confidence and trust. And we weren't negotiating at this time. We were just approaching the work on a day-to-day basis and supporting the people on the ground how to work through any situation. And so we had a pulse. And again, Rhonda's staying in regular communication with our HR director and touching base, Ron and I, almost every week on any specific issue. I would even have to say, I think even, Rhonda might have a daily conversation with our HR director, which is, I think, critical in really holding and building a bond. And that transparency was what I think was critical for us to move this forward.
And as everyone knows, you can only have so many conversations back and forth, but eventually you have to negotiate. And both sides have to come together. So we tried something a little differently. We had our negotiations at a ref member's house, and I'll explain that later. And instead of us sitting across from each other on the table as if we were on different sides, we realized, yeah, there's two different groups here, but we're all under one umbrella, Ravenswood City School District. And going back to our focus is the kids. So we didn't negotiate like we were on different sides. We negotiated like we were one big group. And I say happy family, but I'll say happy family like that. So we didn't sit across the table. We sat next to each other on the floor. We had coffee, we broke bread, and we talked about what are we going to do to change the trajectory of our students. And we know teachers are the most important factor in student success and our unfortunately failure. So instead of continuing to have teachers cycle in and out, how do we create a system which allows our teachers to stay here? And that's how the new career ladder was born.
Yeah, Rhonda is right. We didn't have a table in the middle of us. We were in a living room. We sat in a circle. We didn't take notes like we usually do, passing papers back and forth or versions of what we discussed prior to and redlining, anything like that. There was chart paper. And the chart paper was where we did a lot of brainstorming. But we were able to move forward with this agreement around the new career ladder, which really puts the power in the hands of our teachers. So if you're constantly improving and doing extra, why shouldn't that translate in more money? And so we wanted to reward those teachers who are putting in the time and work.
And like we've already said, we knew this wouldn't be perfect. So we built in revisiting. But we wanted to make sure we had time to make the tweaks. We had time to try things with the teachers and the teachers and the principals. And we knew we wanted to continue to make things better for our students and compensate teachers as the professionals that they are.
So every summer we would go back and forth and bring the negotiation team together, make some tweaks that are necessary. And now we have a couple of different portfolios that were added to the original version. But an example is, the one portfolio example is that there is two informal observations, a formal observation, there is goal setting, and there's self-reflection. And then that makes up the summative evaluation. And based on that summative evaluation score of either emerging, applying, integrating, innovating, depending on your score, that will indicate how many rungs you move up the career ladder. So
I'm gonna, I hate to stop this conversation, but we will come back to this where I really want to get your all's advice for others that want to do this work. That is such an amazing story and one that we could probably spend many more hours listening to, because not only did you innovate in your contract, you innovated in how you bargained your contract in such a productive and collaborative fashion. So first, I'm just grateful for the work that you have both led that I think is groundbreaking in thinking about the role of CBAs You changed the agreement, you changed the bargaining process, you brought in the collective of people that came together as a part of this in such thoughtful ways. So thank you so much for sharing that. I promise we're going to come back to this in the Q&A. I just want to make sure we spotlight a few other stories to broaden the spectrum of innovation that's ongoing. So next, I'd like to welcome two teachers from across the country who've experienced contracts or just agreements unlocking innovation in their own compensation models and their districts. They're going to share a little bit about their compensation models, how they delivered meaningful change for them and their colleagues, and then we'll come back together to have a whole group conversation with all the panelists. So first, I want to welcome Paul Clifton, who's a media and technology teacher in Denver Public Schools. He's going to talk about the district's approach to paying teachers in hard-to-staff areas. And from Chicago Public Schools, we have Olga Contreras, who's a STEM integration specialist and new teacher mentor, here to talk about the district's approach to compensating teachers who take on leadership roles. I'm going to pass it to Paul first.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Definitely honored to be on this webinar and share some of my story. And I'm definitely inspired by a lot of what I've heard so far. So as Evan said, I work in Denver Public Schools, and I teach 3rd through 8th grade technology and media arts at a school called Maglone in the Montbello neighborhood. And being a teacher is a huge part of my identity. And I definitely love teaching. I wanted to be a teacher since I was in the 3rd grade. So this is my dream. So I'm excited to share some more of my story with y'all. And so in Denver, I receive 2 different annual financial incentives because I teach in a Title I school and because I'm certified to teach in Spanish, which is categorized as a hard-to-staff position in the school district. So it's great to get a little bit of extra money in each paycheck. But what I really value about these incentives is that it's a recognition of the work and the extra work that I'm able to do with my skill set. And in terms of the Title I incentive, it acknowledges the fact that the work that we do at our school is fundamentally different from the work of teachers in more affluent schools. And the school district in Denver is so huge and it's very diverse. And the job of a teacher is not universally the same across the board. As for the incentive of being a certified to teach in Spanish, the compensation values a unique skill set that I bring to the table that benefits my school community. So I teach in Spanish and I speak Spanish at school every single day. And not just to teach, but to build relationships with families and the community, so many community partners that we have, and with parents. And I'm an asset to the school in multiple ways, just far beyond what I bring to the table as in my teaching. I've taught at Maglone for 11 years, and honestly, it's not the extra compensation that has made me stay. So the $4,000 that I receive in the extra pay incentives isn't enough to keep me at Maglone. And the research actually shows that we need incentives that are above $5,000 to actually make a difference and influence teachers to stay. So these incentives need to be larger, need to be bigger, and need to make more of an impact for teachers. And so what Denver's done is really meaningful in getting that recognition, but there's still much more progress that needs to be made. And so I've only been able to stay at Maglone as a teacher. Sorry, let me fix my camera. All right, there we go. So I've only been able to stay as a teacher at Maglone because I launched a nonprofit inside the school called the Confluence Media Center. And what we do is we host community conversations and lead youth-led podcasts. And at my school, like part of what we need to do as teachers is to create a sense of belonging. So we have so many newcomer students at our school. And so sharing those stories is a way for us to build that sense of belonging. And so being able to fundraise and be the executive director of this nonprofit has given me a way to financially, incentivize like my teaching salary and make sure that I'm able to stay in the classroom, which again is my dream, right? And so Otherwise, I would need to find another profession or move on to administration. And so this highlights what Evan has been saying on the call, is that we need to increase base pay for all teachers, but also provide higher pay in schools like mine, in Title I schools. In my first few years in the district, they offered financial incentives to schools that showed significant assessment growth each year. And like some of these bonuses were massive, like $3,000, $5,000. But because the incentives were based on the assessment scores of the entire school, it meant you could end up in a situation where students showed significant growth, but because your school didn't show growth across the board, you didn't get the incentive. And there wasn't an equitable way to distribute those incentives. And so our union bargained to elevate base salary and do away with some of those testing incentives. And so I feel like there's so many ways to increase teacher pay, and it's what we do in Denver is unique to us, and it's so important that each district finds the way forward for their particular district. And I think that's critical to success. And yeah, so that's a little bit of my story in Denver and how we do things. And I'd like to pass it on to Olga.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I want to start by saying that I'm a proud Chicago public school teacher. Very, very proud. I worked for 10 years mentoring teachers for free. I work with different universities, but after those 10 years, one of my principals recognized my work, and then she invited me to join the multi-classroom leadership, which is called the MCL. And it was a great opportunity for me to continue growing and coaching several teachers throughout the day. And it was a very real organic work. I learned so much from it. Then I also work with the residency program, where in partnership with a university, we collaborate and we help student teachers to succeed. I was moved to a new position last year, and I became just a mentor for new teachers, which is a great opportunity to connect with new teachers and to bring freshness to my role. Chicago Public Schools has a collection of teacher leadership roles, all under the umbrella of Lead with CPS. I have served different positions mentoring, and I'm able to build relationships, as Paul was explaining. And it is my pleasure to share one of my many stories mentoring teachers. Last year, by the end of the Q1, I was assigned to mentor one special ed teacher. She was in primary grades. I'm an early childhood educator, and for that reason, we were paired to work together. And my story, it's very, very unique because I'm not a special ed teacher. However, both of us wanted to work together. And I remember in our first meeting, I noticed that my mentee seemed overwhelmed and hesitant to connect. But as we started talking about her strengths, I realized that she was very knowledgeable and skillful. Then we moved on into her feelings, and she shared how difficult the inclusion program was for her. As we dive deeper into the emotional aspect of collaboration, she realized that her feelings were getting in the way of connecting with others. As a result, we started planning small action items, and instead of her expecting others to guide her and direct her in the classroom, she was able to contribute with her planning and expertise. Her mind shifted in her way of dealing emotionally with the newness of the profession. Later, she told me that prior to that meeting, she was thinking about quitting the teaching profession. We were laughing. She was in tears because for her, it was a change in life. My mentee's new attitude opened new ways to collaborate, and she was able to successfully establish healthy relationships with teachers and parents, and of course with students. DL students were serviced by two amazing teachers who learned how to co-teach effectively. I saw my mentee transformed from hesitant, lost, to being proud of her teaching practices and to witness the student growth and experience the learning of the students. She kept in mind that I will support her no matter what the problem was, personal or professional. I was there for her. That is what we do with our students. We support them in a holistic way, and that is what our future teachers deserve as well. The benefits of mentoring are monumental for the mentee, for the mentor, students, and families. I see it as an exchange of experience and innovation. Mentoring is a powerful transformative process for all parties involved and brings success for learning and sustainability to schools. With that mentorship programs, education becomes a revolving door. Mentoring is not an easy task, and more than the complexity of it, it is the daily challenge to foster conditions in which deep reflection and learning takes place. So needed, but unfortunately, it is a practice that is poorly compensated. This year, the pay decreased, and I heard mentor colleagues thinking of not performing such role anymore. I'm also discouraged. After almost 30 years of service and experience, I feel like my value is less when it comes to compensation. I hope that such stipend is revised and matches to what we do. Also, these roles are reliant on federal policy and are not protected in policy. They actually aren't included in our contract, which means they are constantly at risk of being eliminated. I've spoken to the Board of Education in support of the program for the mentorship, and they consider getting rid of it. The roles need to be codified in policy so we can ensure the impact that they are making continues. So I really encourage everybody to take into consideration this request. And back to you, Evan.
Thanks so much, Olga and Paul. So those are two other examples, one of stipends that compensate teachers in harder to staff schools that are serving historically marginalized populations of kids, low-income students, and also compensating teachers who are in hard to staff subject areas like our bilingual certification in Denver. And then also the example in Chicago Public Schools of compensating teachers who take on additional leadership. Agree, Olga, we need to get that policy codified in the contract. That is certainly a goal for E4E and something we hear from teachers across the country. So I have deep gratitude for all of the speakers that have shared. We're going to bring everybody back together and have a little bit of a Q&A. Maybe we can start the conversation as everybody's coming back on camera with Rhonda and Gina. I'm curious what advice you would have for others that want to do this. Change is never easy. Change is scary. People are often nervous about change. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you got everybody on board, or what advice you'd have for others that want to do something big and bold like you did?
Rhonda, are you there?
Oh, did I not turn my screen on?
Oh, there you are. Now I can see you. It was me.
Okay.
I think there's definitely some long-term planning ahead that needs to be considered, because this is not a quick thing that will happen. Rhonda and I communicated for months before we even brought it to the table. So there definitely needs to be some long-term planning and future goals that need to be established.
I also think I think someone said, how is this working or not working, or how are people taking it? I always think that, change is hard, even if it's warranted or needed. So I think the biggest thing is having the conversations with teachers, especially about the summative being what is their wrong step for next year. That's difficult because we've had some teachers in the past who have been innovating on one observation or one form of observation versus now you're looking at how are you the whole year when people just walk through your room or this or that. So I think what I keep saying is flexibility. Let's be flexible. Let's try something new. But what we do know is student centered teachers have the biggest impact. And you have a much better teacher who's working one job than working two or three jobs.
And I would also add, we put a lot of emphasis on the teachers, but our leadership team also, thinking of other districts who want to maybe implement something like this, really have to strengthen the practice of our principals going into classrooms and giving quality feedback. That is this work is very dependent on the quality of feedback our instructional leaders are providing our teachers and the confidence and trust that builds when there's competence in that work.
Yeah, amen to all those things. I think what we hear all the time from teachers across the country is that they want that meaningful conversation about their performance, and then they would be very open to the type of innovation that you're describing, Rhonda, and agree that the system as constructed isn't working, so we need to try things. We need to be flexible, and love how you have built in the feedback loops to keep improving and tweaking your system. And shout out to the philanthropists. I saw you answering those questions that have engaged in supporting this work, similar to what DCPS did or others, the sort of necessary resources to make these changes. So shout out to them for supporting that. So I have a question for the group. In E3's research, we saw, and we cited this earlier, that educators of color report the best way to recruit effective, diverse teachers is through leadership opportunities and to pay teachers in hard to staff areas, sort of the description of what Olga and Paul both are experiencing. That's different than the national sample of educators, which just says it's about higher pay across the board. I'm curious from this group who's experiencing these different things, why do you think educators of color might have a different perspective on this? I'd love to start with Paul and then Joe, and then maybe Rhonda, you can close us out.
Yeah, love to chime in on this one. Yeah, so the research shows that teachers of color are more likely to be teaching in schools where the needs are the highest. And a lot of times, I know for me, I feel a huge sense of belonging in my school in McGlone because I'm working with students that have similar stories as mine, and I'm able to connect with them. I feel a sense of belonging in this community, and we're also working harder. A lot of times, we're providing wraparound services and making sure that basic needs are met so that students are able to learn, and that means caring for the families and making sure that they have access to services that they need in the community. So when you're a teacher in a community like ours, it's really important that you have that lens, and it also adds to your workload, and that's just part of it. So we need to be compensating according to those extra duties that we're doing, or those extra things that we're doing for our communities.
Yeah, I definitely look at this as that leadership thing is essential for me. Like first generation Arab American, being a leader in education was a big leap for me because I started off as an engineer and I quit, and then my family to this day like yells at me for not being an engineer. Like, but the reason for that is because they're looking for me. I'm the breadwinner. I need to support them. Their retirement is my retirement. So when I put money away, 50% of my retirement I know is going to my mother. I know she's going to have some bills that she needs to pay. So when I look at leadership, I'm looking for that increase in salary because one, we deserve it, and two, it's something that to make me stay in the profession. For me to even think about continuing another 12 years into education, I need to make sure that I could provide for myself as well as for my family. And I think a lot of, teachers of color view that way where it's like kind of a sacrifice. Sometimes if you're not being paid well, you're going to leave the classroom because you do need to support your family. You do need to create generational wealth for your family, and maybe if you want to have kids and stuff like that. So I think that's something that's always on my mind when I stay in education. What am I getting compensated for, and what position am I going to be in?
Rhonda, did you want to add into anything on that?
Of course. I want to say it's a combination for teachers of color, especially African Americans. It's not just about the salary. great. The hard to teach staff, great. But educators also see themselves as I can lead. I can learn to lead. And what's so powerful for our kids is to see people who look like them in the various positions. They're not just custodians, they're not just paras, they're not just teachers, they're not just but you can also be the superintendent. You can also be a doctor. So when you see people who look like you from 3 to 4 to 5 all the way up until then you can make a bigger you are impacting students' lives even more. So it is very important for teachers of color to be in positions of leadership and be guided in that direction and have the support that they need from their counterparts.
I love all that. There's a recent report that came out from the ILO group that shows how underrepresented women and people of color are in superintendent seats across the country. So thank you, Rhonda, for raising that. Joe, your mom's a lucky woman that you're out there looking out for her. And Paul, thanks for talking about the need to be in our community. It's so important to have students that see educators that look like them and represent them in their communities and their schools. So despite the call for something different, teachers across the country in our polling and in our one-on-ones and in our focus groups are telling us day in and day out that they want something different. Many districts are still stuck in a sort of uniform lockstep salary schedule without any of the innovation. So I'd love to know why we think it's so hard to innovate. We know teachers aren't happy with the current pay structure or the conditions, and we know it's not serving kids the way we want it to. So why do we think it's so hard, and what do we need to do to change that? Gina, would love to start with your perspective from the superintendent seat.
Yeah, I just keep going back to my experience and Rhonda's experience as we were working through this process. And we realized like the one size fits all does not work for our teachers. And especially when it comes to pay, it just seems so deeply ingrained in union culture and our society more broadly. And so when I think about this, Rhonda, as the RTA president, really had to go to bat with her union and CTA, California Teachers Association. Like this is something that was unheard of. And actually, the CTA representative was kind of like in shock and awe in terms of how we were negotiating, because usually it's very contentious. And what we've done in Ravenswood is really be a model of how, if students are who we are focusing on, and knowing that we need the best adults in front of them each and every day, and the teachers make the most impact. And the teachers know this, like and they know that day to day, they need to reflect on their practice and continually learn and grow in their craft. That means you need to get realistic in real time about how you're doing. And we really thought our evaluation system was not a meaningful process. And so we broke it down to the bare bones of how are we going to make this meaningful? And it really means that you have to have honest conversations with each other about your practice. And once we were able to break it down to that level, and knew on average teachers are going to be at applying anyway, because that's what you should be doing, then we were thinking about what does that look like on the career ladder. And so you need to create trusting relationships between management and the union. You need to get that buy-in about the process, and the feeling that it's going to yield positive outcomes for teachers. And that's just really hard to do. And you really have to roll up your sleeves and invest in the time to have these relationships and build these relationships for these outcomes to happen.
That's so true. I mean, at the end of the day, change requires partnership, and partnership requires trust, and trust requires relationships. And I think all too often we get stuck in these roles that we play that are antagonistic. So thank you, Gina and Rhonda, for showing us it can be different, and hopefully others can model that based on their unique circumstances. At the beginning of this panel, Joe opened the conversation by talking about what's at risk if we don't act. We risk losing our most effective teachers. We risk continuing to have vacancies in front of our hardest to staff students in our lowest income communities and in subject areas where we have acute shortages. Olga, I'd love to toss it to you to tell us a little about what are your thoughts on this? What else do you think is at risk if we don't act in these ways?
The sustainability of CPS is at risk. I've seen teachers leaving our school, not because they don't like it, they are very passionate teachers, but I remember one teacher when he noticed that there were a lot of shootings around this area, he just left. Another teacher who was great and really, really good, a new teacher, she had to leave because she couldn't pay living in Chicago. She had to go to the suburbs. So there are so many elements where it comes to economy and living here in Chicago. You know, I have another colleagues who have a part-time job, so they can make up their money and they can make all the payments that they need to be done. Many teachers have student loans. That's another thing that I've noticed, and CPS they do such a wonderful job providing trainings, professional developments. And it's sad that all that investment goes out the window because teachers leave. That's a waste of money. That's an investment that needs to keep growing. And I think providing that salary and that stipends and compensation, that it's fair for teachers, not only our schools will run better, but our city will be a better place to live.
Thanks, Olga. And you're so right to connect the experience of educators to the experience of the broader community. It is sad that we see in most districts really high-performing teachers and teachers that are struggling leaving it at the same rates. What Ravenswood has done is trying to change that. What other districts are attempting to do are trying to change that. I'd love to know what other opportunities exist for improvement. How else can we make our systems of compensating teachers better? Maybe Paul, you can start, and then Rhonda, you can close us out.
Yeah, I'd love to address this. I did some looking around on the E4E website and noticed some interesting one dynamic that I saw was that teachers were compensated for each additional student that was added to their class in the form of a stipend. In our situation here in Denver, we've had a huge influx of migrant students, migrant families into our communities. And at my school, we received the most migrants of any school in the district. And so some of the class sizes, like we've always had this number of 35 would be the limit, and we would never get there. But now, like the majority of our Spanish speaking classrooms are at 35, while our English classrooms right now are at, some of them are at 15. And so there's a lot of inequities. And I think we build up a lot of resentment as while your one teammate has 35 students and another has 20 less students than you. If you're not building in a way to compensate those the educators that are taking on more students, so along with taking on another student who happens to be a migrant student, a lot of times the teacher becomes the point person for that student and that family to help create that sense of belonging in the school, but also in the community. And so it's a huge load to take on. And so, yeah, so definitely some flexibility is needed when we are in these types of situations, something we can turnkey and then be able to compensate teachers.
Rhonda, I think you're on mute.
I am. I had a whole conversation with myself, and it was interesting. So I think one thing I want to answer here, if you will indulge me, this process and this shift was not easy. I am a big union person, and I understood where teachers were coming from. We didn't want to be like other districts that's pay for play, or compensate you based on your test scores or this. And then there's only a certain number. We didn't want to do that. We wanted it to be, it is what you are working on to improve yourself or to work towards in service of your students. And I think the biggest struggle with that is teachers have to know and trust their administrators that I am going to be judged or graded or scored or observed according to my needs and what is truly there. So that's some of the struggle. Yes, it was a struggle with CTA. It wasn't what they would have preferred, but I just remember Gina saying, how do we compensate teachers more? How do we put more money in teachers' pocket? And how come you just have to go up one rung? Who said that? But I think the biggest thing is knowing we have to pay teachers like the professionals that they are. If you think about the level of education we are continually in and our educational path, you should think, I mean, some people start at 40, 50, 60,000 as a teacher. You have secretaries and I'm not diminishing any job. You have other jobs and positions that start higher than a teacher with less education. So how do you treat teachers the way they should be treated? I think that's higher salaries. I think that is higher stipends. Maybe instead of a $1,500 or $2,000 stipend a year, you have a 3-year stipend that's worth $10,000 or $15,000. So then now you get teachers who stay in one place, which benefits students because it always goes back to the kids. And then teachers now, I can focus on my job because I'm not worried about a second job. So I'll just continue to say it's got to be on the students and we got to be compensated more. Teachers make all other professions possible.
Love it, Rhonda. It takes me back to the Obama quote that teachers are nation builders, and they do all of those things. So I'm so grateful to all of you for sharing your stories, for your leadership, both in and outside of the classroom. Joe, you opened us up. I'm going to pass it over to you to close us out with some of your thoughts and reflections. And we're organizers, so we have a call to action for everybody on this call. So thanks, everybody. And Joe, back to you.
Thank you. Great conversation. Thank you, all the panelists. Thank you, Evan, for facilitating. Some things that I'm thinking about from Olga saying there's many elements for teachers to leave the classroom. I think it's super true. And Paul, you kind of echoed that when you said there's inequalities in the classrooms in your own school. But then when Gina and Rhonda, what they're talking about is like, how do we think about this holistically? And then this is a hard process that teachers need to feel that they're being heard and seen. And they're in that feedback loop, what we heard earlier today. And then they're trying to figure out how do we make sure that they're compensated as well as improving their own personal needs. And I have a lot of arguments, I would say, with my administration. When I talk about like the rubric, what rubric are we doing? And are we actually helping the teachers by just following this rubric? I think those things that key phrase, my needs, like what are the needs of the teachers, is something that really stood out to me. So thank you all. So leaving here tonight, there are 3 ways you could play a role in the movement of modernizing the teaching profession through teacher contracts. First, you could add your name to the growing list of people who are passionate about education, and they're calling for a more rewarding, sustainable, diverse, collaborative, and dynamic teaching profession, and for a dramatic modernization of the profession through teacher contracts. I'll give you some time to just take out your phone now and scan the QR code to sign. The QR code on the top right side of the screen. I'll give you some time to do that right now. You can also explore the wider Where We Agree website for inspiration for policy change you'd like to see in your own district. That QR code that I hope you used is on top right, brings you to the site, which is www.whereweagree.org, where you can see a bunch of information on there to help inspire you to talk to your union leaders. You could also use E4E's new Unleashing the Potential of Your Teacher Contracts. It's a resource to help you get involved in policy process in your own district. We'll drop this in the chat now, and you'll also receive a follow-up email along with a recording of this presentation. I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I hope this event made you feel energized and empowered to make some changes in this profession, some needed changes in this profession. Thank you all again. I hope you have a wonderful and restful night, and take care.